He made a famous remark once about reading Hume having woken him from his dogmatic slumber.
Yes.
I take it that what you're now saying refers to this.
Yes.
What was the awakening, in fact? What did Hume awaken him to?
The problem, I think, in a crude nutshell, was this, that Hume, and indeed Leibniz, and such other philosophers that thought about it, had accepted the general view that propositions can be exhaustively divided into two classes. On the one hand, there are what used to be called truths of reason, which Kant called analytic propositions, where, in a sense, they're really true by definition, like a triangle has three sides, or a bicycle has two wheels, that sort of thing. Those, they said, could be known a priori, independently of experience. On the other hand, there were substantial propositions which tell us something not simply implicit in the terms we're using. These, they said, were substantial and informative, but couldn't be necessary. They were always contingent propositions and could be established only on the basis of experience or experiment. And Hume said, and Kant thought he was quite right to say, that if that was right, then philosophy itself was in a serious predicament, because it didn't put itself forward, on the one hand, as an empirical science based on observation and experiment, and on the other hand, it didn't want to say that all it was doing was elaborating a set of tautologies, analyzing the terms in which we speak and think. And Hume's question was, well, is there anything else that a philosopher could possibly be doing if he isn't doing either of those?
But didn't Hume realize, and Kant after him, that it also created a serious problem for the natural sciences? Because scientific, unrestrictedly general scientific laws are also propositions that are neither analytic, they can't be deductively arrived at by logic, nor can they be proved from experience. And they both realized that too, didn't they?
I'm not sure. It should be, I think, a diversion at the moment to go into it. Really what Hume thought about that. I think Hume thought that the sciences could sort of carry on as a body of empirical knowledge. Though, of course, in that case, without the claim to establish that anything was necessarily so. Kant's view, though, was certainly that this belief in an exhaustive dichotomy was mistaken. He had no doubt that it was mistaken, because while one might question the credentials of philosophers in claiming to put forward synthetic propositions that were both synthetic and necessary, that might be questionable. Kant had no doubt that this was perfectly in common form, so to speak, in the natural sciences and in mathematics, so that there certainly were, he thought undoubtedly there were, propositions which were not analytic, but were not empirical and contingent either.
In other words, propositions which applied to the world, but yet which we didn't, as it were, derive from the world.
Yes, but which we could establish simply by argument, yes. And he called them synthetic a priori.
Now, if such propositions apply to the world, but are not, so to speak, read off from the world by experience, by observation, how do we arrive at them?
Well, yes. One has to introduce here, I think, one of Kant's most important distinctions between what he called things in themselves, or the world as it is in itself, and appearances. Now, on the question of things in themselves, Kant would have said, we can't make any demands. Things in themselves simply are as they are, and there's nothing we can do about that. But if you move to the topic of the world as we experience it, as it presents itself to us as an object of experience, to the world of what he called appearances, then he said it's a different matter, because there are certain conditions, he claimed, which any world must satisfy if it is to be a possible object of experience at all.
For us?
For, well, us and other people, I think,
Yes.
too.
Yes.
He thought it a crucial fact that the world is a common object of experience to an indefinite array of subjects of experience. And if there is to be such a world that can be experienced and known about in common to a community of subjects of experience, then, he argued, there are conditions which it must satisfy. And we can say a priori that appearances must satisfy these conditions.
Would it be correct to put what you've just said in the following sort of way, that what there is for us to experience or perceive or know must, of course, depend on what there is to experience or perceive or know, but it must also depend on what apparatus we have for experiencing or seeing or knowing.
Yes.
And that the apparatus that we have is a contingent matter. I mean, to use a modern example, we happen to be equipped to interpret electromagnetic waves of some frequencies but not others. That's to say, we can receive and interpret heat waves and light rays, but we don't receive and interpret radio waves and X-rays.
Yes.
And it's imaginable that we might apprehend reality in entirely different terms from those that we do.
Yes.
Now, Kant is saying, this being so, for us to be able to experience anything at all, it must be such as is apprehensible by our apparatus, by the apparatus we've got.
Yes.
Now, that's not to say that nothing else can exist, but only that it can't, so to speak, exist for us, that we can't know it or apprehend it. Is that right?
Well, I would qualify that in one way. Kant didn't, I think, want to get into considerations about what our sensory equipment specifically is. I mean, what kind of eyes and ears we have. I think he was trying to say something more general than that the notion of a subject of experience presented with a world as an object of experience requires that it should have sensory capacities of some kind and intellectual and conceptual capacities of some kind. But he didn't want to say they must be of this specific kind or that. I mean, he wouldn't have been interested in whether our eyes were different from those of kestrels, say. I mean, just that we must have some way of perceiving.